Welcome to the broadcast. Brother Eric John Phelps with you today on this July 19th, 2024 with 24/7 World Radio. Coming to you now with a podcast concerning the alleged assassination attempt on presidential candidate for the Republican Party, Donald J. Trump. This alleged assassination attempt took place in Butler, Pennsylvania, on July 13th, 2024, which was a Saturday. 3 facts involved in that are that 1 man was killed and 2 others were seriously injured, although they are improving. Those are 3 facts indicating there was a shooter at that time that shot those men. Now, before we get into what actually happened, or what I believe I can prove what actually happened, we must always remember that history is a foundation for any present investigation of an event. If we do not know our past history, then we cannot understand or comprehend the event we're looking at. To have the proper history, that means we have to check out the proper books that were written at the time through the gateway of time as we go back upstream in time, so that when we float down in our canoe to where we're interested in a particular event, we can see where the water came from, where we came from, and now the right analysis can be given as to who was involved, who did it, why. Remember, there's an old saying, 6 friends have I, who, what, where, how, when, and why. And the why is the big one, as Sutherland stated when he was playing the part of J. Fletcher Prouty, L. Fletcher Prouty, in the movie JFK. The most important question is why. But before we deal with why, we must deal with who, what, where, when, how. Then we can get to why. So we must go back to the Kennedy assassination. We must have an understanding of that assassination. And as I prove in my book, the assassins of John F. Kennedy were a series of Knights of Malta, at least 10 of them, involved in the assassination and cover-up, as well as high-level Scottish Rite Freemasons, at least 4 of them, that I name in my book, Vatican Assassins. We also discover that during this time, the FBI and the CIA and the Secret Service, particularly the Secret Service and the FBI, worked together in this assassination of JFK on November 22nd, 1963. I prove in my book that William Greer, the driver of the limousine, was the one who brought the limousine to a stop for 2 seconds. He turned, shot Kennedy in the head, while at the same time the storm drain shooter shot Kennedy from the storm drain out of the sidewalk where the limousine had stopped. But the most important part is that William Greer, escorted by and overseen by Kellerman in the limousine, as Kellerman leaned to the door and watching Greer do the shooting, that these Secret Service agents were responsible for the up-close shooting of JFK. And there was another Secret Service agent in the backup escort vehicle named Big Bertha that was above the Lincoln that Kennedy was in, that shot Kennedy in the back, at least once. So, we must conclude, and it is easily proven, that the Secret Service killed Kennedy. They shot the kill shots. The man who really proves it to me, and for which I had the utmost respect until he was murdered, was William Cooper. William Cooper came out with his great work, Behold the Pale Horse. In it, he put the Jesuit oath, and also he further detailed that the Kennedy assassination was done by William Greer after Cooper had a Japanese firm analyze the Zapruder film. So, it was clear to me then, at the writing of my book in 1999, then 2003, then 2007 with this, my third edition, that Greer, the Secret Service, was involved in the Kennedy assassination. Well, just recently, there's been a Netflix release titled The Octopus, again titled The American Conspiracy, The Octopus Murders, concerning the murder of Danny Casolaro. And Danny Casolaro was an investigative journalist that had pretty much set forth the same entities, the same matrix, the same, what he didn't know was papal, the same papal operations that killed Kennedy would also be involved in killing Danny Casolaro because he came too close. He started to name them, George Herbert Walker Bush and a host of others. And in this very important Netflix movie, this particular woman, who's an investigative journalist named Sherry Seymour, got an interview with a very powerful man whose name was Robert Booth Nichols. Robert Booth Nichols was a Knight of Malta. Robert Booth Nichols was involved with the Central Intelligence Agency. Robert Booth Nichols was involved with the Mafia. He was involved with a host of agencies. He called himself a facilitator. Robert Booth Nichols showed the real Zapruder film to Sherry Seymour, and she tells us in that Netflix series, The Octopus Murders, that the driver, William Greer, turned around and shot JFK in the head. The writer of Behold the Pale Horse, William Cooper, said it was an exploding round. But either way, the driver did the shooting, and now Miss Seymour says the same thing, and she sees the actual Zapruder film. So we conclude that with the JFK assassination, the Secret Service was primarily the killing machine that killed JFK. Now, this is important because the FBI will be used to cover up the evidence, which is very well illustrated in Oliver Stone's movie, JFK, and of course it's very well detailed in On the Trails of the Assassins by Jim Garrison. So, the FBI covers up evidence, the Secret Service does the shooting. Now, let's go to a book titled Hoover's FBI. Hoover's FBI. Again, the title of the book is Hoover's FBI, the inside story by Hoover's trusted lieutenant, Cartha Deke, in quotations, D-E-K-E, quotations, DeLoach, D-E-L-O-A-C-H. The book was written in 1997 by Cartha DeLoach, copyrighted in 1995. Now, who is Cartha Deke DeLoach? According to William Cooper, DeLoach was in command of the FBI Division 5. That's probably the top intelligence division of the FBI. And it was involved in the assassination of, cover-up of JFK in 1963. Cartha Deke DeLoach was a Knight of Malta. Just like J. Edgar Hoover, that notorious sodomite with his sodomite friend Clyde Tolson, J. Edgar Hoover was a Knight of Malta and a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. So here are two knights heading their agencies. Cartha Dica de Loach, FBI. Hoover, FBI, two knights. And then there's another knight who is the head of the Secret Service, whose name is James J. Rowley, Rowley, a most devoted Roman Catholic and papal knight. Well, James J. Rowley was responsible for the assassination of Kennedy in Dallas. He's the head of the Secret Service. He's the man in charge of Kellerman and Greer in the vehicle, where Kennedy's immediately behind them. So, these two men, Cartha Dica de Loach, papal knight, and James J. Rowley, another papal knight, both of them loyal and devoted Roman Catholics, in the killing of a Roman Catholic president, I would add. They're invited to Georgetown University for a series of meetings overseen and hosted by a Jesuit priest there at Georgetown University named Daniel Power. Daniel Power. On page 152 of Hoover's FBI, we read, quote, "The lingering ill feeling between the FBI and the Secret Service following the Kennedy assassination posed a slightly more complicated problem. Each was sensitive about its role in the shooting and its aftermath. Rightly or wrongly, both were accused of failing to monitor Oswald's movements more closely prior to the shooting, and both brooded over these charges. The FBI fretted that it might have advised Secret Service agents that Lee Harvey Oswald lived in the area and had exhibited erratic behavior. The Secret Service took to heart the allegation that it should have broadened its own survey of potential assassins to include troubled misfits like Oswald. Yeah, Oswald, the CIA agent. Oswald, whose cousin was a Jesuit at Springfield, Alabama. And he's just a troubled misfit. Right, Cartha? At the same time, each agency circled the wagons to defend its own personnel and reputation. The result? Serious name-calling, which led to a growing bitterness that threatened the ability of the agencies to work together. We are now on page 153. It was a bad time to quarrel. The nation needed to believe that the President of the United States was safe while driving down the streets of America. As the quarrel worsened, Father Daniel J. Power, S.J., that means Society of Jesus, head of development at Georgetown University, called me and said, "Deaky, why don't you and Jim Rowley have a quiet lunch with me at my office at the university?" Unquote. Rowley, chief of the Secret Service, was a former FBI agent whom I knew and liked. We both accepted. So as an aside here now the Jesuits of Georgetown are going to be hosting the two most important intelligence men in the country. Really, Cartha Dica de Loach, who really ran the FBI, and James Rowley. Both papal knights, both Roman Catholics, both loyal to the Pope of Rome, both loyal to imposing the Pope's temporal power, which is why the Kennedy assassination takes place, because it was not a coup d'etat, it was a punishment of one of their individuals that had been put in power for his disobedience to orders. It was enforcement of the emergency war powers military government that had been established on March 9, 1933 by 32nd degree Freemason Franklin Delano Roosevelt, overseen by his Jesuit master, the one and only Edmund Walsh, Jesuit of Georgetown. So we go on here now on page 153. It was a first of a number of such luncheons. Following each, I wrote a memorandum to J. Edgar Hoover with the increasing conviction that Rowley wished to cooperate rather than, as Hoover suspected, make the FBI a scapegoat for its own agency's shortcomings. Eventually, we worked out a number of administrative procedures that strengthened the relationship between the Secret Service and the FBI and ensured greater protection for the president and his family. Today, it is far less likely that a Lee Harvey Oswald could slip through our net." Unquote. This reconciliation was all the more essential because the new president, Lyndon Johnson, also a Knight of Malta, also educated by Jesuits at Georgetown for 1 year, also a member of the Masonic Lodge, who entered the lodge in Johnson City Lodge in Texas in 1936. So we have Lyndon Johnson, one of their boys, this apostate Protestant, issued an executive order allowing the president to use the FBI for protection as well as the Secret Service. Had Rowley and I not worked out our differences, such efforts would have been difficult at best. Unquote. Well, Mr. Rowley, you're working with Jesuit Daniel J. Power at Georgetown when you supposedly made the FBI and the Secret Service work together in a more effectual means is a failure. Or is it? Because just 6 days ago, on July 13th, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania, an attempted assassination took place, allegedly, right in the face of the Secret Service and the FBI that were the real overseers and criminals involved in the assassination of JFK in 1963. So therefore, as we go upstream and we see this fact, and as I prove in my book, the one who oversaw the FBI and the one who oversaw the Secret Service through his papal knights was none other than Francis Cardinal Spellman. Francis Cardinal Spellman was the American Pope. There's a book written by John Cooney in 1988 titled The American Pope. He shows you the political, the financial power and influence of Francis Cardinal Spellman at the time. And it is unbelievable. That's why he's called the American Pope of the past. He was the most powerful prince of the church in America in 1963. It's this same Francis Cardinal Spellman that will oversee the assassination of Malcolm X in 1965. It's the same Francis Cardinal Spellman that will oversee the attack on the USS Liberty in 1967. In control of the CIA, working in conjunction with Israeli intelligence, including Raphael Atan, that Masonic Jew working for the Pope, who would also betray Jonathan Pollard and result in Jonathan Pollard going to jail for 30 years. The same Raphael Atan of the Liberty attack is the same Raphael Atan that sent Jonathan Pollard to prison for 30 years with abandoning him. It's a network. And it's a network that never goes away. It just is given replacements after individuals in the network happen to die or disappear. So in conclusion, our first conclusion is that as the Secret Service and the FBI were the overseers and real power, the ones carrying out the assassination of Kennedy in 1963, it's the FBI and the Secret Service was the power in staging this event, this alleged attempted assassination of Donald J. Trump on Saturday, July 13th, 2024 in Butler, PA. So therefore, it is not out of the question to then approach this looking for Secret Service collusion in the alleged assassination attempt, because I do not believe an assassination was attempted. But I'll get to that. So, there are some facts that we want to review. The first fact we seek to review is that, just as James J. Rowley was the head of the Secret Service in 1963, and he had ties to the papacy and papal knights. Even so, Kimberly Cheetle, this female head of the Secret Service, she has ties to the papal knights. How do we know that? One of the ties is that from 2019 to 2022, she was the Senior Director of Global Security at PepsiCo. PepsiCo is an international corporation run by the Knights of Malta. One of the past heads was CFR member Donald Kendall. And after the Kennedy assassination, several years later, Cartha Dickey DeLoach, the one who authors Hoover's FBI, happens to go to work for PepsiCo. Richard Nixon was a friend of one of the top attorneys at PepsiCo. When Richard Nixon was in Dallas the day before the assassination, he had met with an attorney for PepsiCo. And he left the following morning before the assassination took place. These multinational corporations are run by the Knights of Malta for the benefit of the Roman papacy, for the reversion to the dark ages of the Pope of Rome, where there was no middle class, there was no private wealth, there was no voting, it was all divine right, and you got what they wanted to give you, just like today. As there are no elections from the U.S. Senate or the President, they are all selections by the power of the papacy in control of both the Democratic and the Republican parties. That's easily provable with other works, but I don't want to get into that right now. So now, Kimberly Cheetle has the same papal ties as did Cartha DeLoach, as did James J. Rowley. And one more thing about James J. Rowley, his brother was a Jesuit priest. James J. Rowley's brother was a Jesuit priest. His name was Francis Rowley. And another Knight of Malta involved in the Kennedy assassination was Alexander Haig, that they would later make him the head of NATO. He'd go on to be Secretary of State under, Reagan. Alexander Haig, the bosom buddy of his brother Knight of Malta, Henry Kissinger, would also have a brother. Alexander Haig had a brother. His name was Francis Haig, a professor of physics at Loyola in Baltimore, and he was a Jesuit priest. So Alexander Haig had a brother that was a Jesuit, and James J. Rowley had a brother that was a Jesuit, and Lee Harvey Oswald had a cousin that was a Jesuit. We must see the Jesuit hand in all of this, if we're to see the Jesuit hand presently that took place on July 13th, 2024. Well, who appointed this woman, this lesbian, this Kimberly Cheetle, to be the head of the Secret Service? Why, none other than Joseph Biden. Biden, the Irish Catholic, most devoted to his Jesuit masters, who had a Jesuit priest, Leo J. O'Donovan, give a message at Biden's inauguration as he was sworn in on a Jesuit Rems Douay version of the Bible. So no doubt Leo J. O'Donovan had something to do with Biden appointing Cheetle as director of the United States Secret Service. Remember, Biden's children, his sons, at least one of them was educated by the Jesuits of Georgetown. Biden is a Jesuit, Georgetown, leftist, socialist, communist, put in place through a rigged election to then do outrageous things for 4 years, driving the white people in general of every different stripe, Protestant, Baptist, Catholic, whatever, atheist, into the new right. And the transforming of the Republican Party, the unification of it, is the party of the new right. I previously thought there would be a new political party, as was done in Germany, when the Center Party that was Catholic, headed by Franz von Papen, the Knight of Malta, was done away with the Nazi Party, with the National Socialist Party. But they didn't do that here. They just centered power and unified the Republican Party as a result of the alleged Trump assassination attempt. This was one of the reasons. Hence, we're now kind of going off and answering the question, why? Why did we have to stage this alleged assassination attempt? One of the purposes was to unite the Republican Party, to create a God out of Donald J. Trump, that God had intervened for him and saved his life. No, I beg your pardon. There isn't anybody taking a shot from 400 to 500 feet away to nick him in the head so that they can have an alleged assassination attempt. That's too risky. Remember, the Jesuits have created Donald Trump since the very beginning, since he went to Fordham for 2 years. Trump goes on to be the Jesuit order's big development of its city, New York City. Remember, Charles Chineke, in his work 50 Years in the Church of Rome, tells us that New York City was in the hands of the Jesuits by no later than 1886. At the time, Chineke, the Martin Luther of America, authored his 50 Years in the Church of Rome. New York City belongs to the Jesuits and the Pope. The most powerful prince of the church resides in New York City at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And as Spellman oversaw the Kennedy assassination, so did the Cardinal in New York City oversee it. Timothy Cardinal Dolan is the overseer of this alleged assassination of Donald J. Trump. He is the man of power, overseeing the intelligence communities, the NSA, the Pentagon, the FBI, the Secret Service. This is the kind of power Timothy Cardinal Dolan has. And of course, he has power over all the big banks in New York, including the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which has its open market desk that buys and sells securities. And through the two little pinpricks of the discount window and the open market desk, they totally control the circulation of the credit money created by the Federal Reserve. This is the power of the Archbishop of New York City. And Timothy Cardinal Dolan is the Archbishop that is responsible for this black op of the attempted assassination of his friend, Donald J. Trump, because Trump is a good friend of Dolan. Trump has gone to the Al Smith dinners for many years with Timothy Cardinal Dolan. Trump is an insider. Trump is one of them. Trump is a part of the swamp. But let's get back to our points. So therefore, Biden, overseen by Jesuits of Georgetown University, appointed Cheadle as director of the United States Secret Service, with the approval and probably the direction of the Jesuits of Georgetown. And so, what does the Secret Service do? Why, they blame local law enforcement here in Butler, Pennsylvania, for the nearly successful assassination of Donald J. Trump, which the county commissioner, I believe, the sheriff, utterly denies, and he's absolutely right. They weren't part of that. But let's take a look at the state police, as Brother George Widger trained and taught me a few days ago. The commander. Now remember, the Pennsylvania State Police is a quasi-military operation. They are the best police force in the state. They're the most disciplined. They're the most well-groomed. To be a Pennsylvania state policeman, you have to accomplish a few things. I know a few of them. So, the Pennsylvania State Police Commander, he has the rank of colonel, and his name is Paris. That's his last name. Christopher L. Paris. Now, the Pennsylvania State Police was in Butler that day. That's Saturday, last Saturday, and they too were part of the attempted assassination and cover-up, because their commander, Christopher L. Paris, is a Jesuit coadjutor. The Jesuits control the Pennsylvania State Police through Christopher L. Paris. How do we know that? Well, Mr. Paris was a graduate in 1998, magna cum laude, of the University of Scranton. The University of Scranton is a major CIA recruiting university of the Jesuits. I went to Baptist Bible College in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. Well, Scranton University of Scranton's not far away. And one of my professors, Rembert Carter, Dr. Carter, said the Jesuits of Scranton are very powerful. And he confronted one of those Jesuits from Scranton, University of Scranton, at the Bible College one day, because Baptist Bible College, or now it's Clark Summit University, under the president that I particularly know, Jim Lytle, that it was bought from the papacy, and all the monarchical edifices there, the big one where they have the library, especially in the classrooms, was a Roman Catholic school for priests. And across the street was a place for nuns. So Scranton is absolutely Roman Catholic. And guess who's out of Scranton? Why, Joe Biden. He's out of Scranton. And they have their University of Scranton there. Jesuit University of Scranton. And the Jesuits would educate Christopher L. Paris at the University of Scranton, and then have him promoted by their immense and yet invisible power to be the commander of the Pennsylvania State Police. And so now, when we see the irregularities of the Pennsylvania State Police involved in the alleged assassination of Trump, know this, that it's on orders of their commander, Christopher L. Paris, trained by Jesuits, and placed in that office by the political power of the Jesuit order. So now we have two people run by the Jesuits. We have Cheetle, Secret Service head, Cheetle, Kimberly Cheetle, run by the Jesuits, and we have now Christopher L. Paris, commander of the Pennsylvania State Police, run by the Jesuits. And furthermore, the FBI is in the same exact position. The Archbishop of New York runs the FBI. Doesn't matter who's heading it, he runs it. And they will do, that director of the FBI will do exactly what he's told to do. Or he will be removed. Like Louis Freeh, Opus Dei, director of the FBI, gets in a terrible truck wreck, nearly kills him. Remember, they enforce obedience to the soldiers that they put in power in their various intelligence communities, the political parties, academia, as well as the press. Remember the killing of Timothy Russert when he was so bold to confront George W. Bush on his Skull and Bones membership and John Kerry's membership in Skull and Bones? Not long after, Tim Russert dies in the newsroom, and a Roman Catholic at that, having visited the Pope a few months before his murder. They enforce their policies by terminating disobedient soldiers in their quest to world government under the final Pope of Rome, using the most powerful, militarily, commercially powerful nation in the world at the time, their Holy Roman 14th Amendment, socialist, communist, corporate, fascist American empire. That's what they use to presently run the world. To do that, they have to control the intelligence communities. And the intelligence communities will then control the political candidates. And if they get out of order, those candidates are discouraged, or they are demeaned, or they are deliberately attacked one way or another. If they can't get rid of them, then they will terminate them. They will kill them. Or if they're going to use them for an alternative purpose, they will fake an attempted assassination that would create all sorts of sympathy for the one they attempted to assassinate, to bring him to the power that they want him to have. And that is exactly the case with Donald J. Trump. Donald J. Trump was never shot. That's nonsense. Just think of it. Think of it. Here you are, the Jesuit general, or you're one of the 4 provincials in America, and you're controlling the other Jesuits of your particular province, of New York province particularly. I think Pennsylvania's in the New York province. The Jesuits have been grooming Trump since the days he was at Fordham as a young man, and all throughout his building career as a mogul of New York City. Trump knows all the men of power. Now, they started to groom him when he was on Oprah. That hateful, racist black wench who thinks she's a white woman. And she says about him running for president. He said, well, I would run for president. And you think you're going to lose? Well, I wouldn't run if I was planning on losing. So the interview between Trump and Oprah, she's an insider, starts to bait the mind of the American people, thinking Donald J. Trump may one day run for the presidency. And lo and behold, he does. He runs for the presidency. He is elected or selected, probably elected, but most assuredly selected, because the Jesuits control the election process through the election news service. Through the election news service. And that news election service, through that service, all the networks go along with it in pronouncing who won the election. And you can read this in a book titled Vote Scam. The News Election Service with Collier and Collier, who, by the way, shortly after just happened to die. And the News Election Service tells you who won the election and how the votes were counted. All lies. All lies. The News Election Service is about selecting and then decreeing who won the election and hence who the president is now. Get it? Vote Scam by Collier and Collier. So now, going back to our point, they had an election where Trump won. And for 4 years, he did many good things. Just as Adolf Hitler did many good things in post-war Weimar Republic. The average German backed him because of the things he did. The building of the Autobahn. We're going to engage in building, which is what Trump promises to do, which he did. Bringing back American manufacturers, which he did. So he did many good things. But what gives him away as an agent for the Jesuits is that he not only was trained by the Jesuits, but he was his children. I believe Eric Trump goes to Georgetown University. So he sends his children to Georgetown or to a Jesuit university, just as Joe Biden sent his children to Jesuit universities. They work together. They train their children in the same Jesuit institutions. Why should we ever believe that Biden is an enemy of Trump when everything Biden has done has facilitated the rise of Trump and the driving of the American white people in particular into the arms of Trump? Biden is the greatest campaign manager for Donald J. Trump that Trump ever had. Everything Biden does facilitates a Trump win. They work together. The Democratic and Republican parties work together. They are not enemies. That's only for the novice, for the strictly pedestrian, that they are enemies. The blacks on the side of the Democrats and the whites on the side of the Republicans, and will continue this agitation for years, going back to Rush Limbaugh, that Jesuit coadjutor. Because he'll never talk about the Jesuits. Of course, now he won't because he's dead, but he would never talk about the Jesuit order or a high level of Freemasonry or even the Council on Foreign Relations. That is the That is the political body of selectees that will be selected to man the administration of every president, since going back to 1921 when the Council on Foreign Relations was created out of New York City, overseen by the Archbishop of New York City. So, here we have this setup here in Pennsylvania here, in Butler, Pennsylvania, to now drive the white people in general through sympathy, and even many blacks through sympathy, into the arms of Trump. This is why they pulled off this charade of an attempted assassination of Donald J. Trump. This is why. And so now, with his speech, I'm glad I waited till last night to watch his speech, because some things he said in his speech were absolute lies. The first lie remember, he's reciting what happened to him in Butler at the time of the attempted assassination, using teleprompters. Tell me, my friend, if someone wants to just nearly assassinate you, do you need a teleprompter to tell the people what happened? I don't think so. I wouldn't need a teleprompter. I'll tell them exactly what happened. And furthermore, I wouldn't get some sissy-looking fine Band-Aid over my head, over my ear, to make it look we were fixing it. I'd put my ear right out there with a couple of stitches or half blown off, whatever it is, and I want everybody to see it. Not Trump. It's cleverly and nicely covered up with some sort of special wrap or Band-Aid, so that you can't see the details of the wound. But you're just supposed to accept that by faith, right? I mean, Trump wouldn't lie to you, would he? There was no wound. Or if there was a wound, as soon as Trump is allegedly shot, when he hears the shots fired out, he puts his hand up to his ear. Watch this very slowly. Puts his hand up to his ear, and he looks down, and look at his hand. There is no blood. There's no blood on his hand. It's just as ridiculous as the shooting of Oswald in the basement of the Dallas PD, when supposedly Jack Ruby shot Oswald down there. There's one little glitch. There ain't no blood on the floor. Oswald was shot in the ambulance by one of the cops. That's how he died. But he wasn't shot by Jack Ruby. Brian David Anderson will further prove that to you in his work that he's done. So it's the same way with Trump. There was no blood on his hand. You go frame by frame, and you look at that carefully. There's no blood on his hand. But he immediately goes down. You know why? Because he's told to. This has all been it's all been practiced. They've all practiced to this. So Trump looks at his hand, goes down, just like he's been told to do, and the Secret Service agent off to Trump's left, if Trump is facing the audience, off to his left, is the most powerful Secret Service agent there. I don't know his name. Immediately, that Secret Service agent gets Trump down, and I maintain at that point that Secret Service agent took out some blood of a little vial and put it on his ear and maybe even scratched it a little bit with a knife or whatever, but he did something because nobody can see it, and then these other Secret Service agents are coming around making sure that nobody can see. They're all in on it. Just like all the Secret Service agents, in Dallas that day, were in on it. So let's regress just a little bit here. The Jesuits have been preparing Donald J. Trump for 50 years, at least. They brought him to the place of power where the people will follow him. You see, the Jesuits cannot put a military dictator in place unless the people are first made willing to follow him. This is what was done with Stalin. This is what was done with Mao, the two greatest killers. Remember, the big murderers of the 20th century is first Mao Zedong, put in power in 1949 by Francis Cardinal Spellman through the American State Department, and the betrayal of Chiang Kai-shek. Then you have the USSR, that Stalin was put in power here, and that one of the tutors and overseers of Stalin in the 40s will be Averell Harriman, a Knight of Malta and a Skull and Bonesman and an American, and he was also in the administration of JFK. The wicked Averell Harriman was in Moscow advising Joseph Stalin. And this can also be seen in the great book written by Anthony Sutton titled Skull and Bones, America's Secret Establishment. So let's back up here now. Oh, one more thing. After the attempted assassination, Trump nearly immediately, within a day or two, appoints his vice presidential running mate. So Trump appoints J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, James Donald Bowman, that's what he was born, James Donald Bowman, with his evident name change, obviously, to J.D. Vance. James Donald Bowman was born August 2nd, 1984, Middletown, Ohio, and he's Scotch-Irish descent. He was adopted by his mother's third husband, had his name changed to James David Hamill. What else here? Let me see. Well, suffice it to say, he was born James David Vance. He was born James Donald Bowman, 1984, and now he's James David Vance, J.D. Vance. He got his J.D., his law degree, from Yale. And at Yale, he was inducted into Skull and Bones. So J.D. Vance is part of the Skull and Bones secret society and establishment controlled by the Jesuit order. And his wife, Odysee, is really tied to the certain High Knights of Malta, certain Pilgrim Society, and other things. So she's most assuredly tied to the network also. Vance and his wife, J.D. and his wife, Odysee, are controlled by the Jesuits. And if something happens to Trump where he's killed or he dies, the Jesuits have a perfect stooge. White Scotch-Irish descent, who is now Roman Catholic, who converted to Catholicism, saw him crossing himself at the Trump rally. And his wife, also connected to the Jesuit order. So Trump has chosen exactly who they want him to have. And that's right after the alleged attempted assassination. So you got Bonesman now in the Trump administration that's coming. So Trump's a Freemason, you got a Bonesman here, and you're going to have all the secret societies represented. You're going to have CFR people there. And by the way, another tie between Biden and Trump is they both backed Anthony Fauci. And all the other things that the Jesuits wanted to happen, that Brian Artis so well said, that Trump and Biden work together, and they're both working with Fauci and the mass murder of the Jesuit Dart with the Demisphere. By the way, I recently saw Brian Artis at a meeting, several months ago in Michigan. And I went up to talk to him. I gave him a copy of my Vatican Assassins ebook, and I said, I want to thank you for what you've done on the work of the Jesuits and showing Fauci's involved. And you know what? Artis never had anything to say about the Jesuits during his speech, during his presentation. I wonder if somebody got to him and told him, you don't say anything more about the Jesuits, Mr. Artis. Or we'll have our host Jesuit here that had been a Jesuit for many years, Gabriel, what's his name? Let me see here. his name being Douglas Gabriel, who was the host at the meeting, longtime Jesuit, and I went to talk to the guy. I had met him on a broadcast previously. And so the Jesuits are running the narration with the COVID affair, and their perfect stooge, their student, the one that they have groomed for this for years, was Anthony Fauci. Well, guess who Trump and Biden backed? Both of them backed Anthony Fauci, the Jesuit. Further showing that Biden and Trump work together for the same brotherhood. So now, we have Mr. Vance, Bonesman. We have his wife, USA, connected to other secret societies and men of power. Both of them are lawyers. Both of them graduated from Yale. Vance is, the guy of like a nothing white guy out of the sticks, becomes successful, giving everybody hope. Vance is a secret society member. He's a bonesman. And the moment you join Skull and Bones is the moment any red-blooded American should never trust you. So here's Trump. Now, going back to my point I was going to make, and I think I'll be done. They have groomed Donald Trump for over 50 years. They have him in the place of acceptance by the population, particularly the white population that's been raped, pillaged, and plundered with all this savage black-on-white crime for the last 60 years or so. As I show that they kill 10 white people a day and they rape 100 white women a day in this empire. But that can't be reported because that'd be racism and prejudice, wouldn't it? That's something Joe Rogan won't deal with, all the black-on-white crime, the statistics there. That's right, that'd be racism and prejudice, and Joe wouldn't be on anymore. But that's what the Jesuits want. They want all this black crime to drive the whites into the new right, and it has succeeded. And here he is. Here's Trump. So now the last straw is we must do something to create universal sympathy for our candidate. So we will have an alleged assassination attempt. We will use our Secret Service to do the shooting. We will use the Secret Service to kill the patsy. And what's the patsy's name? His name is Thomas Matthew Crooks. He's 20 years old. But when they put his picture before us, he looks like he's about in the 10th grade. And he's 20 years old. They did the same thing with Trayvon Martin. When they put his picture up, they put a young Trayvon Martin and not the savage that appeared, that was his real age, who nearly killed George Zimmerman, pounding his head into the concrete before Zimmerman rightly shot and killed him. So what we have, of course, there's a whole big cover up there, which I will cover later on with my dear friend Ed Canfield, who taught me about it. But they do the same thing here with Crooks. Get a younger picture of him, not the long hair, older 20-year-old that he was. And so he's going to be the distraction. And for him to do this, he's probably programmed. He's probably an MK Ultra mind-controlled Manchurian candidate. He hates Trump, and he's going to go up there, and he's going to shoot a few rounds off, kill a few people, kill at least one and wound two, or maybe the shooting's done by a totally different shooter. And remember, the Secret Service had this Thomas Matthew Crooks in their sights for 3 minutes before the shooting started, before he started shooting. And according to the Secret Service shooter, he said he was told to stand down and not shoot him. Which proves further that the Secret Service High Command was involved in the shooting. But they weren't involved in the shooting to kill Trump. They were involved in the shooting to kill some innocent bystanders, but not to kill Trump. And they're going to make this Thomas Matthew Crooks like a Lee Harvey Oswald. Lone gunman. It'll be outed someday in the future that there was more than one shooter and that Trump was not to be shot. There would have to be an act going on that would make it appear that he shot when in fact that he was never shot, to create sympathy for him, and he's going to leave the stage with a clenched fist with no blood on it. The same hand that reached up to his ear and came down with no blood on it, it's the same hand. It's going to be the clenched fist with no blood on it. And so I maintain that after the shots rang out, Trump hits the floor, looks at his hand, there's no blood on it, and immediately the nearest Secret Service agent does something to the ear, either puts blood on it or scratches the ear of some sort to make it look like it's a graze shot. And now we have evidence that the assassination was attempted. And they take him out, and Trump raises this wonderful arm of fight, and you have these two white Secret Service agents with sunglasses on next to him. You got the American flag in the background. It's a great photo shot to put everywhere to create sympathy for him and that he's going to lead us because he's a fighter. So, one more thing. If I was the Jesuit general, I would order my provincial of the area, my American assistant in Rome, to order the provincial of the area just to facilitate the appearance of an assassination, because we've been preparing our man to impose new right dictatorship for 50 years. Do you really think that the Jesuits, the masters of the art of warfare, the ones who brought Sun Tzu's great work, The Art of War, in here, they're the masters of Sun Tzu. They're the master of the art of war. Do you think in their art of war against the American people, deemed enemies and belligerents living in occupied territories since March 9th, 1933, do you think in their final crescendo of destroying white Protestant American Western civilization that they would sacrifice their great tool that they have prepared all these years? Do you think they would run the risk of a shot between 400 and 500 feet of a man that's not a true marksman? This Thomas Matthew Crooks, he's no marksman. Do you think that they would run the risk of shooting a shot to graze the head of their candidate when he could move to the right or to the left and it would be fatal? Do you think they would run that risk? Never. He's too valuable. He's worth his weight in gold for what the order's going to bring to pass here. Remember, he loves Louis XIV, that Jesuit king of France. He's patterned his 66th floor in Trump Tower with $100 million worth of gold, patterned after Versailles, which was Louis XIV's castle. That's Trump. He's got his Roman Catholic wife, send his students to children to be educated by Jesuits. He's educated by Jesuits. What more do we need to see that he's been groomed for this hour? And the Jesuit general would never risk a shot like that. By the way, the same thing in Dallas. A supposed mafia shooter was there at the fence. James, what was his last name? And he's going to shoot what's called a fireball, but that's never going to hit Kennedy. That's a distractionary shot. It's a distraction. Kennedy's going to be killed by the limousine driver and the storm drain shooter and the backup SS Secret Service agent going to shoot him in the back. Those are the real shots, the distractionary shots from the grassy knoll. It never hits Kennedy. That's never going to happen. So this is a distractionary shot by Thomas Matthew Crooks. It's distractionary, but evidently he thinks he's not going to die, or he knows he's going to die, but he's going to do it anyway, so he has to be some sort of mind-controlled MK Ultra individual. And so Trump was never shot by Thomas Matthew Crooks. He was never shot. The shots rang out. Trump goes down because there's going to be some other shots after he goes down. It's going to kill these other people, one of the other guys, and wound two others. But the Secret Service agent that takes him down is going to do something to his ear. Going to put blood on it, or maybe scratch it above the ear, whatever. And by the way, there's some white guy that's put a picture up showing that the trajectory is passing by Trump. That this was the real shot. Well, if it's a genuine picture of a trajectory, it cannot be the shot that wounded Trump. That trajectory, if it is indeed a trajectory of that AR-15 of the Thomas Matthew Crooks, it's another shot. Because it's not the shot that allegedly wounded Trump. Because if you look at the height of the trajectory in relation to the ear of Trump, it's much lower. It's more like at the bottom of the ear. Bottom of his left ear as he's turned. So it would be at the bottom of his right ear that got shot. The trajectory is too low. So that's not a trajectory that wounded Trump. So that's another lie. Lying about the trajectory that wounded him, lying that he was shot. Trump lies about the blood that's all over his hand in the speech last night. There was no blood on his hand. So this is obviously a Secret Service deception to give the impression that Trump was shot and that there were Secret Service oversights. And of course, any Secret Service that's doing its job would never have allowed anybody on that roof. They wanted him there. They wanted him there. He's going to fulfill a purpose for them. He's going to shoot a couple of shots off, and then they're going to shoot him, and then there'll be nobody to interrogate or talk to because he's probably going to crack under interrogation. And so now he's gone, and furthermore, the one who did another man, a Secret Service agent that probably did the shooting, nobody's knowing anything about him. There's no question about another shooter when there has to be one. That kid didn't pull off 8 shots, bang, 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 bang. Maybe he did, but most assuredly not one of those shots hit Trump. No, there's not going to be the risk taken to shoot him from 300 to 400 feet. Not happening. It would do away 400 to 500 feet, I should say, from the rooftop to Trump. And meanwhile, remember, the Secret Service shooters, the special ops snipers, are already placed in the direction to shoot this kid as soon as he pulls off a round. Because when he pulls off a round, then shoot him. They're told to stand down for 3 minutes. He's already in the sights of the Secret Service agent. Stand down. Why? Because we want him to shoot so we can kill him, and there'll be no evidence to the contrary that this is the guy that did it, and it just grazed Trump's ear, and now we can build him up into some sort of a national hero protected by God that everybody should swarm in to uphold him because he's been protected by God in this assassination that the Lord stopped. And then we're going to get in Franklin Graham, that other brother Freemason, a Freemason Trump, and he's going to have a prayer there, masquerading like a Christian when he was behind the COVID deception, also having people come to his tent and get a shot. I mean, all these wicked sinners are busy working together before this time. Now they're galvanized together during this time, and they're going to speak. So, in conclusion, with that foray of various facts and rantings and ravings, number 1, Donald Trump was never shot by an attempted assassin. He put himself to the ground as told. His ear was scratched or cut or whatever, creating blood. Maybe the Secret Service agent poured some blood in his ear and it's draining down off his face, so it's starting to run. There we go. When a shot from an AR-15 at an ear would take it off, or possibly more than that. That's a high velocity round. And so it's just a flesh wound here, kind of like John Wayne. Brother Freemason John Wayne. And now we have the picture where his fist is up. There's no blood on the fist, no blood on the fingers. And the Secret Service agents are there with him, and the flag's in the background, and we now have a real hero. And now we're going to take him off to the ambulance with the Barney Fife women. They're Secret Service. One can't get her gun in her pocket. What a joke! Get these women out of the Secret Service. It's a place for men. It's a place for shooters. It's a place for killers. That's where you got to be. And these women think they can do what men can do. They got to be out of their minds. So, because it ultimately weakens the Secret Service. You have women manning it, ordering it, it's weakened. If I was a foreign foe, if I was in command of another army, I'd want all the women in places of power. Just put them in power. Get all those women in there. Make it that much easier for me to conquer this country and this government. That's exactly what the Russians and the Chinese are thinking. So anyway, I think I've made my point. Trump was never wounded. He was never shot. This has created sympathy for him. This galvanized the Republican Party, and this is why. 6 friends have I. Who, what, where, how, when, and why. So this now galvanized the Republican Party. They're all together now with Nikki Haley, who opposed Trump, and Mitch McConnell, who opposed Trump. They're all gathered together now in a unified Republican Party. And that's exactly what the Jesuits want, because this Republican Party is coming to power. And it's going to morph into the new right. We're going to have a 2-front war. They're going to move the capital to Denver. The Jesuits have great plans for this new right. And Trump's going to lead the way. And the American white man will be the sucker once again. That's why I say the only solution to all of this is your state must declare its independence from Washington, because Trump is as part of the swamp as anybody else. Remember, Chucky Schumer likes him. He likes Donald Trump. Why, they put him in office. Chucky Schumer, the wicked Masonic Jew who's behind the cover-up and murder of the Branch Davidians. That's good old Chucky Schumer. So they're all working together. Trump is leading the way. Biden has helped to put him in office. And it's going to be one ungodly, wicked 4 years under Trump when he's brought to power, when he's selected. And make sure that you know that he is going to facilitate a 2-front war. That he will build the economy, because you can just control the credit by the Federal Reserve. He will build the economy. People will be happy that we're going to have a 2-front war. Then they're going to send millions of our young men off to die for nothing. We're going to fighting the Muslims, or we're going to fight whoever, fight the Russians. And again, the only solution is true prayer, seeking the Lord. You need to be saved by the grace of God. If you haven't been saved, you need to believe the gospel, that Christ died for your sins, was buried, and rose again. That he's coming back, and he's going to set up his, well, you have to believe that he died for your sins, was buried, and rose again. That's the gospel of 1 Corinthians 15, 1-4. True repentance and faith. And once you are saved by the grace of God, and you leave the Catholic Church, and you leave the Muslim Brotherhood, and you leave the Muslim religion, and you leave Orthodox Judaism, and you leave Hinduism, and you leave all those satanic religions, and you embrace the Word of God, the AV 1611 English Bible, or some translation based on the Textus Receptus, and you start reading that and growing in grace and knowledge of Christ, then you'll have the power to resist the Jesuit papacy and its power over this country through the District of Columbia, calling for a Declaration of Independence. And then let's watch the Lord and see what he does. So until next time, Lord bless. Maranatha.